Madam Chair, it'll be just a moment.
Certainly, my apologies. Okay,
We should be live.
fantastic. Thank you, Danielle. Good evening and welcome to the September 9th, 2021 meeting of the ERCA Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order, and just to confirm that all members attending from the in-camera session preceding this meeting are still with us this evening. I do see you all. Thank you. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that this land is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Petawatomi peoples. We value the significant historical and contemporary contributions of local and regional First Nations and all of the original peoples of Turtle Island, North America, who've been living and working on the land from time immemorial. Please raise your hand if you to indicate if any members need to declare a conflict of interest. Okay, seeing none at this time. I need a mover to approve of this evening's agenda. Deputy Mayor Larry Verbeek, seconded by Councillor Marley Bowman. That is carried. We are going to convene into the hearing board, that the Board of Directors sit as the hearing board in respect of applications under Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act. That is moved by Councillor Vanderdolen and seconded by Councillor Ji-Win Gill. Anybody opposed? No, thank you. Okay, we are now going to conduct hearings under Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act in respect of two applications. I do have a bit to read here, so please be patient. Cindy Hollister is requesting relief from access, ingress, egress policy requirements to construct a dwelling on a vacant lot on Lake Erie Drive in the town of Amherst.
Tanya.
Yes.
Chair, I have a conflict of interest on that.
Okay, Marilyn. Well, then we can ask you at this time if you would like to mute and remove your camera.
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. And I can just message in the chat when it is time for you to return. Thank you. That property is in the town of Amherstburg. We then have Walter Branco of Noah Homes to request relief from access, ingress, egress policy requirements to construct a dwelling at 1105 Heritage Road in the town of Kingsville. We, as the hearing board, are unaware of the matters being brought forward, and we are only now receiving and reviewing the information provided by staff this evening. The authority has adopted regulations under Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act, which requires the permission of the authority for development within an area regulated by the authority in order to ensure no adverse effect or on the control of flooding, erosion, dynamic beaches, or pollution or conservation of land, or to permit alteration to a shoreline or water course or interference with a wetland. The staff has reviewed and proposed work, and a copy of the staff report has been given to the applicants. The Conservation Authorities Act, Section 2812 provides that permission required under a regulation made under Clause 1B or 8 shall not be refused or granted subject to conditions unless the person requesting permission has been given the opportunity to require a hearing before the authority, or if the authority so directs, before the authority's executive committee. In holding these hearings, the authority board is to determine whether or not a permit is to be issued. In doing so, we can only consider the application in the form that is before us, the staff report, and such evidence as may be given, and the submissions to be made on behalf of each applicant. The proceedings will be conducted according to the Statutory Powers Procedure Act under Section 5 of the Canada Evidence Act. A witness may refuse to answer any question on the ground that the answer may tend to criminate that person or may tend to establish his or her liability to civil proceeding at the instance of the Crown or of any person. The procedure in general shall be informal. However, this is a quasi-judicial process and provides for evidence to be given in response to a member's question. Therefore, staff and applicants will be asked to swear on an oath or provide affirmation to speak the truth. In accordance with Section 28 of the Act, an applicant who has been refused permission or who objects to conditions imposed on a permission may, within 30 days of receiving the reasons, appeal in writing to the minister, who may refuse that permission or grant permission with or without conditions. Through order in council, the responsibility for hearing appeal has been transferred to the Mining of Lands Tribunal. If the applicant has any questions to ask of the hearing board or of the authority representative, they must be directed to the chair of the board. Staff will first introduce the applicant, his or her owner, and otherwise wishing to speak, and then present the staff's position. The applicant and or their agent may then speak and may ask any questions on the staff position if they so desire. I would also remind everyone that the hearing board is open to the public. However, as stated earlier, this is a hearing that is a quasi-judicial process, and accordingly, the general public may observe, but are not third party to matters before us today and cannot participate. We as the hearing board will question, if necessary, both the staff and the applicant agent. Before I ask Dan Jenner, Regulations Coordinator, to introduce the applications, I would ask that he swear on oath or provide an affirmation to speak the truth.
Affirmation, Madam Chair.
Good evening, Dan. Welcome. So you do solemnly affirm that the evidence which you are about to give in these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you.
I do.
Fantastic. Now, if the applicant, Cindy Hollister, will you be speaking towards your application? If so, I would ask that you either give an oath or by affirmation. But if you are not speaking to it, we can just continue on.
I wasn't planning to speak to it.
Okay, Cindy, thank you. Dan, did you want to speak to the applicants, to the applications?
Absolutely, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Let me try to find you.
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. The first application before the committee is for Cindy and Brad Hollister, who are looking to build a house on a vacant piece of property on Lake Erie Drive within the town of Amherstburg. This is within the Bar Point area. Other applications have been brought for this area in the past. Next slide, please. So we are requesting relief from the access, ingress, and egress policies, and we can see the property a little bit more zoomed in there with a couple of temporary coverall type structures on it. Brad and Cindy's property is located within the flood-prone area of Lake Erie, and the minimum required floodproofing elevation or lowest opening elevation is 176.200 meters above sea level. The construction drawings and submitted information clearly indicate that all openings will be above this regulatory elevation. The raw 100-year flood elevation is 175.900 meters above sea level, and the ERCA minimum road elevation, which allows for 0.3 meters or 1 foot of water over the roadway, is 175.60 meters above sea level. The provincial minimum road elevation slightly below that. This particular property has a very, very small stretch that is below that typical provincial minimum by approximately 5 inches, and a section that is below the ERCA minimum by approximately 13 inches at the deepest points. The rest of the access route, with the exception of one very small area on the third concession road, is above the ERCA policy requirements. We are fortunate that there are multiple access routes to this property. Emergency first responders within the town of Amherstburg are aware of the low-lying nature of these roadways. They have updated their emergency response plans to reflect this, and they have provided us confirmation that they will be able to get to this property with a delayed response in the event of an emergency. So we are going to be meeting all other regulatory standards and recommending that the committee or hearing board approve this application and waive the ingress and egress policy requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jenner. Now on the application from Cindy Hollister to request relief from access, ingress, egress policy requirements to construct a dwelling at the town of Amherstburg be approved. Moved by Larry Patterson, seconded by Mark Carrick. Anybody opposed? That is carried. I'm going to now message Marilyn. Nicole, are you able to message Marilyn? Actually, no, here I got it. Ish. Do we have her yet? Sorry about that. Do we know? Oh, there she is. Welcome back, Marilyn. Now on the second application, we have Walter Branco of Noah Homes. Mr. Branco, if you plan to speak to your application, I would need you to either take an oath or an affirmation, but if you're not planning to speak to it, we can just have Dan go ahead.
Yes, just have Dan proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you everyone for being here tonight to hear this application. This application is located within the town of Kingsville. It's been made by Walter Branco of Noah Homes, who will be building a home on this waterfront property for his clients who have also joined us tonight. Again, Mr. Branco is the agent for the applicant or for the homeowner. They are going to be building a single family dwelling, and we are again requesting relief from the access, ingress, and egress policy requirements. This being a waterfront property, it is subject to setbacks from the hazard from Lake Erie, and we have information contained within the application that satisfies all minimum.
Can I put the camera?
Yeah, let me get out of the way then.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, Dan.
Not a problem.
One moment. I'm sorry, Ed, just so you know, you're still not muted, Councillor Sleeman. Thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. So we are satisfying all minimum setback requirements from the lake. We are also satisfying the minimum opening elevations for the structure, which would be 176.2 meters above sea level. Similar to other sections of Lake Erie, the raw 100-year flood elevation is 175.9 meters above sea level. The minimum provincial road elevation is 175.4 meters, allowing for approximately 0.5 meters of water over that roadway, which is deeper than the ERCA policy currently allows for. This is an isolated stretch of Heritage Road where we are approximately 9 inches below the provincial minimum and approximately 17 inches below the ERCA minimums. The road in this particular location is the deepest, is the lowest portion. So most of these properties along here have been raised and are fully developed. So this is an existing lot of record in a fully developed area. The roadway is adequately delineated on both sides. Emergency first responders are aware of the low-lying flood-prone nature of this roadway. And as I said earlier, we're going to be meeting all other regulatory standards, including setbacks and minimum opening elevations. With that, we are recommending that the committee approve this application for permit and waive the ingress and egress access policy requirements. Thank you.
Okay, board members, on the recommendation to approve the application, moved by Deputy Mayor Verbeek, seconded by Morley Bowman. Anybody opposed? That is carried. Thank you to the applicants for attending this evening.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
You may stay if you like, and if you leave, we understand. Thank you.
Thanks.
We now are going to reconvene as the Essex Region Conservation Authority Board of Directors. I need that moved by Trevor Jones, seconded by Marilyn Morrison. Anybody opposed? That is carried. Mover for the minutes of the June 17th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Directors, moved by Councillor Sleeman, seconded by Laura Lucier. Anybody opposed? That is carried. We have the minutes of the August 24th, 2021 meeting of the Executive Committee and the recommendations therein be approved. Moved by Councillor Courtney, seconded by Councillor Vanderdolen. Anybody opposed? That is carried. Do we have any business arising from the previous minutes? None? Well, for announcements, again, good evening and welcome to everyone tuning in from home tonight. Summer visitation at conservation areas and trails has continued to exceed expectations. Since reopening in July, more than 2,000 guests have visited the John R. Park Homestead Conservation Area. As staff collect visitation data, it is interesting to note the visitors from the city of Windsor and from outside of the region are the two largest user groups, with a fairly even distribution of guests from across county municipalities, reinforcing why the homestead was voted best in Windsor, Essex for the past 3 years. Visitation to Holiday Beach over the summer has doubled when compared to the last 2 years, and the number of annual passes sold has been the highest in the last 5 years. As well, we opened our virtual hunting platform in August with tremendous success and significant uptake. Applications for permits continue to be received at a record pace established in 2020. In 2020, over 1,400 permits were issued, and our regulations department is on target to match and or exceed this number in 21. The 1,400 permits were the highest of any conservation authority in the province. This fall, Conservation Services staff will be implementing the control of invasive Phragmites in a provincially significant wetland in Amherstburg to improve the biological health of this wetland located near the mouth of the Cunard River. Phragmites control is a significant concern shared by all regional municipalities, and this undertaking will provide valuable information for future Phragmites control projects. In partnership with the City of Windsor, erosion protection and fish habitat construction will continue on Peach Island. To date, the authority has facilitated over $500,000 to assist the city in completing phase 1 of the shoreline protection and habitat enhancement project. We are also continuing our work with farmers to implement new practices to reduce the amount of phosphorus entering into Lake Erie. I'd like to extend my appreciation to the Essex Region Conservation Foundation as the participants in its fundraising golf tournament was an excellent event, which raised over $37,000. Once again, a big thank you to the foundation. Also a reminder that the foundation will host the Essex Region Bike Tour on September the 25th with modification to ensure participant and volunteer safety. Registration information can be found on the Essex Region Conservation website. I too would just like to make an additional statement. And I feel that Vice Chair McKenzie will support me on this. I have to just thank the staff, our administration, and our board members, seeing this year through in this professional team fashion that we have. We have navigated through a pandemic of many challenges. We've managed through administrative changes, as well as changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. You should all be proud and know that is not gone unnoticed. There's challenges, and how you navigate through those with integrity will carry this team forward successfully. So I extend a heartfelt thanks to the entire team. Okay, now this evening we don't have any delegations or presentations. We do have reports of approval. Floodplain prioritization and relative risk assessment. James Bryant will be speaking to our first report this evening. Please note he is on voice call. I'm not sure that he has the best service. So we're going to, here he comes, he's logging in now. Thank you, James, for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you just confirm for me quickly that you can hear me?
I can hear you. We can all hear you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you and through you. So the report before you references some past board reports that we've brought on this particular project. It has some associated contextual information as to why we're actually doing this work. I should say why this work was done. I'm sure you've noticed the appended final report is lengthy. There's an abundance of technical information. But to break it down, what we've done is we've completed a form of risk assessment that would guide administration with respect to floodplain mapping activities, future floodplain mapping activities. One of the largest gains, aside from the direct results of the study, is that ERCA administration gained a methodology that can be continuously refined as we have new data available to us, and as long-term planning policy changes and as growth areas are reassessed. The work, it's already paid dividends. the data that we got directly from this project, even at the early stages of the project, it enabled us to be successful in a substantial grant application that was specific to the Turkey Creek watershed and some of the modeling activities that we're doing there. That's actually addressed in a separate report. There's a few administrative recommendations there for you, and I can do my best to answer any questions from here. So bear with me if I drop out. I will rejoin over voice. So just bear with me, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, James. Does anybody have any questions or comments for James? Vice Chair Kieran?
Thank you, Chair and James. Can you hear me, by the way? Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
I can. Thank you.
Okay, good. So this is a really important process that you're undertaking right now, and it's going to, I think, inform development patterns in the region for literally decades when we look at the last time this process was seriously undertaken. So I think it's really important for us to make sure that we get all of this right. And one of the things that when I read through this report, and a lot of it is fairly technical, but what I do understand, and it's a point of reference that I hear all the time, is the 1 in 100 year storm. And the way that I'm understanding the way the flood management plan, at least from a stormwater management piece, that we're basing the recommendations that we're going to make on that metric. And I wonder whether or not within your sector, folks that are doing these types of analyses are continuing to use that 101 year storm event as the baseline, or if there are other metrics that are being used by different agencies or organizations that have the similar type of an orientation, just to reflect the extreme weather events and the climate change impacts that we're seeing happening across the globe.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. So I'll start by saying we'll separate stormwater management from floodplain mapping activities. And the reason I say that is typically across all of Ontario, through guidance from former MOE, but now MECP, all the guidance documents, including our own that we've done locally here, is always based on that 1 in 100 year storm event. Obviously that storm event changes regionally, through rainfall patterns, and that's what you get with, intensity, duration, frequency curves. So stormwater facilities are designed with that in mind. That's a acceptable risk to take on going forward for development. For floodplain mapping activities, we have guidance through other documents through the province, Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and there's actually 3 zones across Ontario, zone 1, 2, 3. We used to be regulated by Hurricane Hazel. Other zones also rely on Hurricane Hazel, and then there's also the Timmins storm. What we've done here locally is we've transferred our regulatory aspects with respect to floodplain mapping from Hurricane Hazel to a 1 in 100 year, which is the lowest acceptable storm event that you can have that would meet provincial requirements. So that's the only reason why in our area, when we talk about development patterns and stormwater management, that yes, stormwater ponds are designed for a 1 in 100 year storm event. And then for our floodplain mapping activities and regulations, they're set up for a 1 in 100 year flood event. So I'll keep going even further a little bit. A 1 in 100 year storm event is related to rainfall quantity over a duration, where a flood event is actually related to a flood depth. So sometimes we start with modeling exercises in a 1 in 100, and we start, calibration to see what a 1 in, that 1% chance flood event might be. It could be related to actual calibrated gauge data. It could be related to a simulated rainfall event. So there are some differences there that we have to account for. Now, with respect to this specific study, because it's a relative risk assessment, we tried to pick something that was reasonable, and a 1 in 100 year IDF relationship is appropriate in that sense, because if we apply a different type of event here. And this statement is related to climate change as well. If we do something that's a little bit more intense, or change outfall conditions, or whatever the case may be, across the board as a relative sense, the relative risk ranking doesn't really change in this scenario. Everything kind of goes up or down simultaneously. So that's why we stuck with that in this sense. And the report, there's not much on it. I want to say it's on maybe page 5 of the actual report. And there's some contextual information there that kind of says why we kind of ignored climate change. And that's, they talk about non-stationarity factors such as more intense rainfall events and that sort of stuff. So with that going forward, and I'm sure Tim can maybe even comment on this back in the day when we changed from Hurricane Hazel to 1 in 100 year flood event, because it does predate me. If we applied that regulatory event here locally, development becomes, if we talk about challenging, it becomes nearly impossible in certain areas. Large, vast areas that you cannot develop. So I believe that back when we transitioned from the Hazel event to the lowest required event, a 1 in 100 year, that was associated with enabling development. So I hope that kind of answers the question with a little bit of history tied to it. And if I didn't, please let me know.
Yeah, you definitely unpacked it pretty well for me. I see Tim wants to chime in, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Vice Chair Mackenzie. James is 100% correct. In 1985, we went through a process to review the regulatory standard. 1 in 100 year and or maximum observed is the provincially approved regulatory under statute protection standard for the Essex Region Conservation Authority. That minimum standard, though, is enhanced by a freeboard that's applied through our board-approved guidelines, policies, and procedures. And we technically are reviewing exactly what freeboard levels that should be provided through planning processes and updating planning cycles as we move ahead. The minimum protection levels, so that we are looking at those regulatory standards are, and we're still proposing to base those on our provincially approved statute of 100 year or maximum observed. The 100 year statistically is a 1% probability in any given year you'll see this storm. The storm in itself, though, that we will consider moving ahead does change and evolve with respect to those things that are applied, as James said, the IDF curve analysis, updates to our stormwater guidelines, updates to our modeling processes. So what we use for a storm to us to consider the 1% probability will change. It may have started out being a 4-inch and 6-hour wet ground condition storm. It's going to evolve because it's going to have to reflect on those intensities and those unusual events that we're getting hit with, specifically Lakeshore, Tecumseh, and Windsor most recently. And those are put into those assessments of how we come up with what that level is and how we're applying it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, James. And Madam Chair, I'd be prepared to move the recommendation at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Probably through you to James or Tim, the floodplain prioritization. So now we've got the high risk areas, is from what I can gather out of this report. And it does go hand in hand, obviously, with development, future development, probably concerns for safety, for damage to properties and things like that. So based on what we're seeing, these maps, I mean, the secondaries, the tributaries, because everyone, again, I'm sure every municipality, every councillor here knows that everyone wants to be abutted to a naturalized area, abutted to a tributary, a creek, a pond, a lake. Do you foresee, after this being all said and done, I see that Big Creek is a high concern or a high priority, and I'm referencing that because that's my municipality, a good chunk of it. Do you foresee, when this is all said and done, the mapping is going to actually come further inland as a result of these higher waters? and potentially these more devastating storms? And if so, how urgently are we going to work on that? Because again, OPs come and go, and we set up new areas for residency in primary habitat. And I'm just curious on that, knowing that this is kind of important, when could we foresee, and once the results are in and the setbacks, whoever determines the setbacks on these new floodplains, when would they be enacted? And is that based on each conservation authority, or how would that work?
So thank you through you, Madam Chair. So yeah, again, this is I'll call it step one of many in the whole process, and I know you understand that. And what you see there is a high risk area in terms of I'll call it an inland. We haven't done the combined analysis to say, okay, well, what's the combination in terms of flood prone area from the lake along with the inland in this particular exercise. What this does is it allows us to say, okay, you know what, if we have funds available to us and we have willing and able partnerships with the municipalities, where can we allocate our resources so that we can get our best bang for buck, so that in these areas where they are high risk areas, we can actually start doing the real hydrologic and hydraulic modeling to define those floodplain extents. I can't really comment on, whether the extents themselves, will change for the better or worse, because, that's really subject to, looking at what the existing conditions are and what the future conditions are, or future considerations are at the time of that mapping. So an example of that being Turkey Creek right now that we are working on outside of your area. However, in that area, we're looking at, okay, we're dealing with some dated, vintage mapping. We're looking at, well, what are the actual existing conditions out there now? Has development proceeded in a fashion that, has it actually addressed some of the hazards or not? And going forward, what are the future considerations that have to be taken into account when we deal with this? So, like I said, I can't comment on the regulatory floodplain extents themselves. And then to the point of the regulation limit is defined by the hazard limit. So until we find that, that's where the regulatory limit would be applied to afterwards. So it's step one of many. I believe there is, and I apologize if I don't have it page. It would be page number 3 in the actual report, final report, that kind of shows floodplain mapping framework.
Breaking up, James.
Yep, you broke up, James. We heard page 3 of the report.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Fantastic.
Can you hear me now, Madam Chair?
Certainly can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I apologize. Page 3, I believe, of the final report outlines kind of the process there, and we would be at the far left, flood hazard identification and priority setting. And moving forward, what Councillor Courtney, you're referring to, would be all of the other information that would come out of the preceding steps there in terms of the hydrologic and hydraulic mapping, geomatics, and then inundation mapping that's tied to flood risk assessment. So I may have danced around your question. I apologize for that. It's just there's a lot of unknowns in terms of where that regulatory limit would be set once we go through that. And again, where we go from here is going to depend on available resources to us. I will say.
Go ahead.
No, I'll just say, yeah. Again, I was just going to reiterate the fact that this enabled us to get some of that money to go to that next step. So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because obviously there are some priority areas. So you have the data that the conservation authorities come across is as a result of probably crews going out to actually physically see, holy smokes, houses are underwater. I mean, you look at, Leamington. So that's all I was saying. So we've got some data already. You're just going to explore that a little further to see what the consistent, maybe new thresholds might be, is what I've gathered. Yes?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we've, part of the work is to gather the field data. Then part of the other work is, related to considering other things that may not have been in the past in terms of considering what we would call critical infrastructure and lifeline facilities, right? Diking systems, roadways, transportation networks are critical infrastructure. Sewage, drinking water treatment facilities, where are they located? Well, inherently by their nature, they have to be close to the water to take and discharge. So there's other items there that we can consider going forward. And this again is a step of that in that direction.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Burney, did you want to add something?
Specific to to Member Courtney's line of questioning, our hydraulic assessment historically has identified acceptable setbacks. Those setback distances are adequate regardless of the storm event to provide protection to the water course and the people being set back from the water course. The protection level could change slightly. However, the extent, as James alluded to, reflects directly on our hydrology. And our settlement area is expanding dramatically out into areas where mapping was cut off historically. In those areas, those hydraulic assessments have to be refined to say, in those areas, how far do we have to stay back and how high do we have to build up? The most recent example of that was the large and significant project that the authority participated in with the town of Leamington for the significant greenhouse development, wherein it was found that several thousand acres was potentially flood prone. And then we worked with Leamington staff to identify appropriate protection levels and appropriate setback distances to ensure that the development is protected, that the development doesn't adversely impact or affect downstream municipalities and or water courses, and that the development doesn't adversely affect the infrastructure itself, that being municipal drains, rivers, creeks, and streams.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have anything additional for James? Okay, then on the report, I did have Vice Chair McKenzie. You did say you're going to move that. Am I recalling that correctly? Okay, Vice Chair is moving it, seconded by Councillor Courtney. Anybody opposed? That is carried. On report BD 2221, financial activities for the 7 periods ending July 31st, Shelley McMullen, who has prepared the report before you this evening, is available to answer any questions. Do we have any questions or comments for Shelley at this time? Shelley, do you have anything you wanted to highlight?
Nothing further than what's written in the report, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Then on report BD 2220, unaudited statement of operating activities for 7 months ended July 31st, 2021 be received as distributed for members' information. Moved by Councillor Carrick, seconded by Larry Patterson. Anybody opposed? That is carried. BD 2321, Turkey Creek hydrologic and hydraulic modeling project update. James can respond to any questions on this report. We did just speak to some of that action a little bit. Councillor Carrick? Questions or comments?
Yeah, some comments.
Sure.
Just in regards to this report, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to the City of Windsor, Town of Tecumseh, and of course my municipality for looking forward to this report coming forward, and also thank the ERCA staff and the board for supporting this report, and also the feds and the province for fessing up some money, which is hard to get these days. Having said all that, understanding that we are at the end of the stream, and Turkey Creek and Cahill, with the overflow and the recent rain events, and you can talk about the 100-year flood that seems to be happening every other year, that kind of thing. So our concern, I guess, is the further down it goes before it gets out to the river, the more high risk we become. And we have a lot of residents that are very concerned and sent us tons of letters, and there's associations that are also very concerned about along that area and the overflow and the potential developments that'll create more of an overflow to that thing. So what we're basically looking for is basically an expedited process and the report to come forward. I believe that would be probably phase 2, where we would get more clarity. And I just want to pose that question as once phase 2 comes, we have any idea how quickly that might come the process. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Again, we are reviewing the phase 1 report, and once everyone is comfortable with moving forward into phase 2, and there's a cost associated to that. There was an estimation that was done prior to the phase 1 activities, and that estimation, I believe it was around 225,000 or so. Obviously split with the proper apportionment between the three partners. Now, with that being said, as we wrap up phase 1, we're looking at getting a refined cost associated with phase 2. That cost will be distributed to those partners, and we will need to get confirmation and acceptance moving forward on that. That discussion is a little bit easier now that we have that 182,000 or so that's eligible expenses through the federal grant. And then subsequent to everyone agreeing to that, we would have to bring a recommendation to the board to enter into a second professional services agreement to complete that work. I fully appreciate the urgency, and that is shared on all sides. And we are working expediently on this project. I still anticipate us having a phase 2 report, hopefully near the end of the year. That just depends on how quickly we can move forward with coming to agreements with respect to that cost moving forward. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions or comments? Okay, then on report BD 2421, be received for members' information, moved by Councillor Dane Mallock, seconded by Deputy Mayor Bailey. Anybody opposed? Report BD 2521, watershed management services activities, report for June, July, and August of 21. James, again, can answer any questions related to this report. Do we have any questions or comments at this time? Okay, seeing none, that the review of regulations and planning applications as presented in report BD 2521 be received for members' information, moved by Laura Lucier, seconded by Councillor Bowman. Anybody opposed? That is carried. Environmental registry reports. Conservation Ontario comments on the regulatory proposals phase 1 of the Conservation Authorities Act. So that Conservation Ontario comments to the Environmental Registry of Ontario regarding the regulatory proposals phase 1 under the Act be received for information. Moved by Jim Morrison, seconded by Trevor Jones. Anybody opposed? That is carried. And for correspondence, letter from Andy Mitchell, Chair of Conservation Ontario, to the Honourable Minister Piccini, MECP, regarding the regulatory proposals. Again, that is just for correspondence, and letter from the Essex County Field Naturalist Club regarding creation of a park at Candidate Natural Heritage Site, dated August 24th. That this correspondence be received. Any, Councillor Lucier, seconded by Councillor Patterson. Are there any questions or comments to the correspondence? Okay, anybody opposed? Okay, that is carried.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Bernie.
We have report BD 2421.
Whereabouts? Yep, I thought I already did that one. What page are you referring to? Because we did that. You did speak to it.
It's a report for information on the foundation, Conservation Foundation.
Yes, I believe. Oh, I skipped you. Do you know why? Because I felt like you were going to talk too long. Or maybe because I already listened to you for a bit. I was like, oh, I blocked you out. My apologies. Okay, well, let's get back to C, report BD 2421. And you know what is funny is I did underline brief. Essex Region Conservation Foundation Strategic Plan 2021. Tim Burney will provide a brief introduction and respond to any questions on this report. Go ahead, Mr. Burney. I do apologize.
No worries. Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions. We are going through some reaccreditation for our foundation. We are blessed with a very active foundation and just an excellent group of volunteers who give a lot of their time towards some fundraising activities conducted on behalf of the foundation for those projects and initiatives that they report back to this board on fulfilling. We are going through Imagine Canada reaccreditation, which is a fairly significant feather in our cap with respect to having that accreditation, because large-scale donors are wanting to ensure that money that is donated is properly invested. And it's the highest level of accreditation for a charitable organization to have. We've gone through the strategic plan, gone through the strategic planning activities. The plan is attached to the report. And again, our foundation's been active since '77 and has had great success in raising money and completing those endeavors on the foundation's behalf. Happy to answer any further questions.
Well, thank you for that, Mr. Burney. And I can attest as well, our foundation is very active and I'm grateful for them for sure. Councillor Patterson, you had a question? Go ahead.
I would just wanted to move that. I also wish to thank all the members of the foundation for all their hard work and dedication over the years. It's been, an outstanding job by that committee, and every one of them are happy to be on those committees. After saying that, I would move the recommendation or move to receive.
Fantastic. Questions or comments? Or go ahead, Vice Chair. You're seconding that? Okay, fantastic. Any questions or comments towards it then? Okay, moved by Larry, seconded by Karen. Anybody opposed? That is carried.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I just would like to make sure, since I jumped a little bit, that we are at F, Environmental Registry Reports. Is that correct? Conservation Ontario comments on the regulatory proposals, phase 1 under the Conservation Authorities Act. That Conservation Ontario comments to the Environmental Registry of Ontario regarding the regulatory proposals under the Conservation Authorities Act be received for information. Questions or comments? No, moved by Councillor Sleeman, seconded by Councillor Carrick. Anybody opposed? That is moved. Oh, actually, we already did do that, I feel like, Nicole. Because we were into the Naturalist Club?
Yes, we
Okay.
had an earlier recommendation for that.
Okay, so then when I jumped out of there to get back to the other report, I still need a mover on the field naturalists on correspondence 1 and 2.
Madam Chair, that was moved by Laura Lucier and seconded by Larry Patterson.
Okay.
So we are at number 13, Committee of the Whole, endorsing actions of Committee of the Whole.
Okay, wow, Tim, I zipped right by you. Whoa. Apologies again. Okay, well, prior to this regular meeting of the ERCA board, the board met in the Committee of the Whole, and I would like to call for a resolution to adopt the actions of the Committee of the Whole. I require someone to move the motion. Moved by Trevor Jones, seconded by Morley Bowman. Anybody opposed? That is carried. Now we also have to endorse the actions of the Committee of the Whole, correct? You have this separately here. Or am I going right to new business, Nicole?
Apologies, Madam
My
Chair.
apologies.
Solely to endorse actions of the Committee of the Whole.
Okay, so that's already complete. Now we go to new business.
Correct.
Okay, under new business, is there any new business that members wish to address? Councillor Carrick?
Yes, thank you. I just like to congratulate Mr. Bernie on winning the golf tournament. So I was told.
You cheated? Cheated. Any other new business? I do plan myself on attending the bike tour. Is anybody else going to? Okay, great. Okay, then I'll reach out to you guys and maybe we could pack a basket. Big basket. Okay. Other business. The next meeting of the ERCA Board of Directors will be held on Thursday, October the 14th, 2021, starting at 6 p.m. via Zoom web conferencing. So now we are adjourning at the September 9th, 2021 meeting of the Essex Region Conservation Authority Board of Directors be adjourned. Moved by Deputy Mayor Verbeek, seconded by Deputy Mayor Becchetti. Anybody opposed? Well, this concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you all. Please continue to enjoy the conservation areas and trails this coming fall and stay safe. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Madam Chair, committee. Thank you.
Have a great evening. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Night. We're still live.